Hello students, welcome to your lab exam number 2 review and rough point breakdown discussion. First, you should remember that there will not be any questions on EKGs or vector analysis or mean electrical axis. You have already taken your EKG exam earlier in this semester. Your lab exam 2 will include your PhysioEx number 5, number 6, number 7, and number 9. It will also include your blood pressure experiment, your central venous pressure experiment, discussion on acid-base balance and problems that were done in your lab manual, renal clearance values and problems that were done in your lab manual, spirometry, both the FEV1 spirometry, the dynamic, as well as static, and there will also be questions on your urine analysis experiments as well. So your exam, you can expect about 70 to 75 points on your lab exam. This will depend on your personal instructor, but that's roughly what you can expect. How much of that will be extra credit? Again, that's going to be up to the individual instructor if they offer any at all. But you can assure yourself that if some is offered, it will not be more than 5% of the exam. Next on this slide, you're seeing the point breakdown, the rough estimate of point breakdown for the PhysioExes and your wet labs. So you can expect about 5 to 6 questions with a point each on your PhysioEx 5, about 2 to 3 questions for PhysioEx 6, about 8 questions on your blood pressure lab, about 5 questions from your central venous pressure lab, and 21 total points roughly on acid-base questions. This would include problems that we discussed in your lab manual, as well as your PhysioEx 10, which addressed acid-base balance. About 12 points will come from your respiratory labs on spirometry, as well as PhysioEx 7, which dealt with a lot of spirometry as well. Your urine analysis lab will have about 3 to 4 questions. Your PhysioEx 9 on renal physiology is about 3 to 5 questions. And then lastly, you can expect renal clearance problems worth about 11 points. Regarding your pH problems from your lab manual, the problems that we did together in lab, please remember your pH problems when you calculate pH. It is going to be within a viable limit, roughly between 7.0 and 7.80. When you give your pH, when you actually calculate that, it will be worth 1.5 points, and make sure you give up to 2 decimal places after the decimal. So if you calculate a pH of 7.358, you would need to say 7.36. Does that make sense? 2 decimal places to the right of the decimal. That's what we want to see. So you're going to have 2 pH problems. They're going to be worth 10 points each. And the point breakdown is shown here in these bullets that I'm highlighting now. Again, 1.5 points for correctly calculating pH. Depending on what your instructor wants, you might need to type in your equation, show your work, and show your answer. Or you might need to type in your work and select your answer from a drop-down menu. Be ready for both. Either way, be ready to show your work. Next, for 2.5 points, you need to name the specific condition and support your answer. When you support your answer, we need to, and again, this is going to be a written response, or you might have a combination of written response and drop-down menu with answer choices to select from. But when you are writing your response, please be sure to include the normal values for PCO2, normal values for bicarbonate. Please state our traditional statement of, for example, let's say you calculated a pH of 7.36. You would say this pH is below 7.40, therefore this is acidosis. There are two ways a person can have acidosis: too much acid or too little base. Then you say, when I look at the patient values for CO2 and bicarbonate, I see that they are both elevated. The patient has too much acid and too much base. And normal values for the acid are 35 to 45 millimeters of mercury for CO2. And for base, it's 22 to 26 millimolar for bicarbonate, right? So those are the things you're going to say. Because both are elevated, then this would be too much acid. It is too much CO2. This is respiratory acidosis. This is what we mean by name the specific condition and support your answer. Then you will need to identify one possible cause. Again, depending on your instructor, it might be that you personally write in one possible cause, or you select a possible cause from a drop-down menu. Then we will ask you, can the patient be helped or hindered if you injected sodium bicarbonate, which would be a base, or Ringer's lactic acid, which obviously is an acid, and explain. So in our example shown here, a person with pH of 7.36 being slightly in acidosis, if we injected Ringer's lactic acid, that would make it worse. That's going to make their pH drop. If we add sodium bicarbonate, this would help. It would elevate the pH back up toward normal. So that's going to be 1 point. For 3 points, you have to talk about the compensation. Be specific. What do we mean by this? Again, this might be completely fill-in, or you might have some drop-down menu options. And make sure, if it's a drop-down menu, you select all the correct answer choices. In our example currently, it is respiratory acidosis. There will not be respiratory compensation because when it's a respiratory disorder, the respiratory system does not compensate, but there will be renal. And you need to be able to describe this to the tubular level. You should be discussing our reversible bicarbonate reaction. You should be talking about carbonic anhydrase activity being elevated due to a lower pH. You should be talking about the PCT reabsorbing all of the filtered bicarbonate and how. You should be talking about sodium hydrogen antiporters. You should be talking about no net gain nor loss of bicarbonate at the PCT. And at the late distal convoluted tubule, you should be talking about hydrogen secretion, and with the hydrogen conjugating with other conjugate bases like ammonias and phosphates, and the bicarbonate made in the cell being a net gain. All of this was discussed in the acid-base lecture. So that's going to be worth 3 points. And then lastly, another point for describing what kind of urine the person would be making. Would it be a normal urine? Hint, never pick that. Or would it be acidic or basic? And I'll remind you, the urine, if there is renal compensation, the urine is going to reflect the problem the body has. So you're going to have 2 pH problems, 10 points each, that's 20 points. And you're going to have one of those problems be acidosis and one of those be alkalosis. And one of them will be respiratory in nature and one will be metabolic. Okay, so you're going to have one of each. Your PhysioEx 10, if you go to Streetwise Physiology, my YouTube channel, and you look under my playlist, specifically Physiology Lab 2 playlist, you will see a discussion, 2 different discussions on PhysioEx Exercise 10. One is done live in the classroom, and the other one is recorded using these PowerPoint slides that address each activity. So this slide I'm showing you here is just one slide of many from that PhysioEx 10 discussion found on my YouTube video. Again, same situation for PhysioEx number 5. The discussion is there 2 times. There is a live and a PowerPoint recording. The live recording versus the PowerPoint recording. The live recording is 13 minutes long, I believe, and the PowerPoint recording is about 51 minutes long. So you're going to want to go and check those out. Especially if you can't answer the questions in the review of what you did for each PhysioEx. So in general, I recommend you go back and review your data for each and every single one, every single PhysioEx that you've done for Lab Unit 2. What did you do? Why did you do it? What kind of data did you get? What does this show us? And again, if you can't get through your review, you can always watch the videos again on YouTube. For PhysioEx number 6, same thing. There are 2 recordings, a live recording in the classroom and a PowerPoint recording. I do recommend both, but they basically tell you and show you the same thing. Now, what about your blood pressure and central venous pressure labs? Your central venous pressure and blood pressure lab has been recorded. It is also found under Lab Unit 2. It's about an hour and 40 minutes long because it also includes us collecting the data. And in that review, I tell you about this picture that's shown here down at the bottom right and how it's important that you understand this picture where it's labeled as no flow, turbulent flow, laminar flow. When do we take the systolic pressure? When do we take the diastolic pressure? Again, all of this was reviewed. You know, every time we did a lab, every time you did a PhysioEx, every time you did a wet lab, there was a review. There is a review. There is a discussion. So that is where you're going to find specific concepts in those discussions where your instructor or myself say, this is what we're going after on your lab exam. Those are individual reviews for every single exercise that you've done for your Lab Unit 2. Doing one big review here is not what we want to do. Each lab has its own unique review in case a student needs to just brush up on a few concepts for a particular lab. Again, PhysioEx number 9, there is a live discussion and also a recorded discussion using the PowerPoint slides like the one you are seeing here. What about your urine analysis lab? Well, for your urine analysis lab, you need to review what urine-specific gravity is and how it can be affected in different physiologic states, like if a patient is dehydrated, or if they have SIADH, or they have diabetes insipidus, or they have uncontrolled diabetes mellitus. How will that affect their urine-specific gravity? What is Long's coefficient? And what does it do? What is the actual number for Long's coefficient? And which values from the urine-specific gravity do you multiply Long's coefficient to? And what do we get at the end of that? What are the units for what we get at the end of that? Please review what microscopic sediments we would expect to see in normal healthy urine. What can we expect to see in a normal healthy urine catch? How would that be different for male versus female urine as it applies? And then lastly, review your chemical analysis, specifically the dipsticks. Should we find glucose in the urine? We also did the Clinitest tablet experiment. What did that show us? What were the colors that were present, etc. Next are spirometry labs. Again, we did those together, and that lab has been recorded and uploaded for you all. I shouldn't say it's not been uploaded to YouTube, but for the street class, I did record that lab and I gave you the link for it. And our spirometry labs are the static and dynamic spirometry, as well as the spirometry discussion for PhysioEx number 7. Again, you should be ready for matching of these volumes and capacities to their descriptions on your lab exam. And you should also be prepared to talk about what happened in the patient with emphysema versus the person with an asthma attack. Please review your PhysioEx 7. Again, there are 2 different recordings. There is a live recording. The live recording for PhysioEx 7 was combined with PhysioEx 10. And then there is also a PowerPoint recording for PhysioEx 7. And then lastly, as you learned in your respiratory lab, be ready to analyze an FEV1 over FVC dynamic spirometry curve. Make sure you know the values for each of these boxes. How big are they? Make sure you understand the importance of paper speed, and make sure you know that every millimeter in vertical distance can be converted into a volume of air. All right, that concludes the very brief overview of Lab Exam 2. Thank you.